Well, oak before ash, barely a splash. Ash before oak, we're in for a soak. If the old rhyme is right, we could be in for a dry summer. So far, the oak trees are budding first. But in future, there might not be many ash trees left to compare them with if experts are right about the spread of ash dieback disease across the country. The government's tree task force, there is one, is about to publish its report on this tree disaster and how to avoid it happening again. Susan Watts has been investigating its conclusions and finding out whether any of our native ash trees can still be saved.
There are new scents in the air and suddenly green shoots everywhere here at Kew Gardens. They say this year's endless winter means we're skipping straight to summer. Spring will be brief, but long enough to get an idea of how far ash dieback disease has spread since it reached our woodland trees last autumn. With spring finally here, tree experts will be looking for any sign of ash dieback as the new leaves emerge. Here at Kew Gardens, so far, they've not seen any sign of infection, but the next 4 weeks will be crucial. And there's a feeling here that the arrival of this infection, sooner or later, is pretty much inevitable. Ashwellthorpe Wood in East Anglia is where it all began, and it's spread through this wood with a vengeance. This is where ash dieback was first spotted, as it moved beyond nursery imports and out into mature woodland. And with ash our third most common tree, dieback could alter our landscape beyond recognition. So you see it as a historic species we should...
Yes,
right.
Yes, part of our heritage, isn't it?
Anne Edwards is a part-time volunteer in these woods. She was the first to notice the classic signs of the fungus Chalara fraxinia that causes ash dieback and knew that she had to act.
It's come in via the branch, which would have the leaves, and then into this main trunk of the tree and caused this characteristic diamond shape of dead wood.
Some of the trees in this wood are 700 years old. Once the disease takes hold, there's no cure. In continental Europe, it's already well established, typically infecting 90% of ash there. Maybe it's a British thing, but scientists here aren't prepared to give up just yet.
So this is a bit of ash tree, and you can see it's quite heavily infected here, just about these points, and the dark bit shows where the growing edge of the fungus is.
In this lab, they're trying to understand the DNA of the Chalara fungus and of the ash trees it infects. In Denmark, where they've lived with dieback for longer, they found that around 2% of trees can resist it. The hope is to find a British equivalent.
Really what we're trying to do is give nature a helping hand. So by identifying the right kinds of trees to do the crosses, that would happen in nature probably anyway, but if we can make that happen more rapidly, then we can rebuild the ash population.
But that could take years. In the meantime, the Forestry Commission is trying a more direct approach, planting out different species of ash to see if any are tolerant. They've asked farmers to help by volunteering land in return for a grant.
This is the field we're planting. That one? Yes, we've also got another one adjacent, a bit further across.
This is essentially ground zero for Chalara, and we know that they will get infected within a year or two. It will take 2 or 3 years for the trees to show the symptoms of Chalara. We then got to grow on progeny from those trees. That might take 4 or 5 years, and we've got to make sure that they are then resistant. So it could be 10 years or more before we see trees on sale that come from this trial.
Soon this whole field will be planted out with young ash trees. How long they survive is less certain.
It'd be nice if they all survive, and we had a massive ash tree plantation here. We'll sadly said that they expect a 90% loss.
So we've been looking at the spread and the risk from...
Since the disease arrived as spores on the wind from Europe, scientists at Cambridge University have shown it's possible to predict its spread using a computer model.
And if we compare the predictions from the model with the data for where we've actually found infections in the wild environment, we see that there's very close agreement.
They can now use that model to help local authorities plan ahead as they cope with dead trees beside roads and railways. These won't fall down straight away, they'll just get more bedraggled over a decade or so. And modelling could also help pick the most effective places to plant resistant trees, if we find any. Had it been in place sooner, the model could even have helped to prevent the arrival of ash dieback in the first place.
Undoubtedly, we could have been better prepared. We could have estimated when the disease was likely to reach the UK. Secondly, we could have identified how rapidly it might well spread in the UK. And thirdly, in combination with discussions with member states in the EU, there may have been an option to slow down the spread across the EU.
Instead, in recent years, he says, science has been preoccupied with the minutiae of how diseases affect individual trees, rather than whole populations. One lesson from Chalara, shown here, will be to shift that emphasis. Now that it's here, options are limited. As well as trying to identify resistant trees, targeted use of strong fungicides might protect prize ash specimens. Then there's simply pulling up ash saplings in areas where the infection has yet to get a grip. As to lessons learned, the government's tree task force, led by Professor Gilligan, is about to publish its report. A new chief inspector of plant health, or tree czar, and a register to prioritise coming threats are both under consideration.
The only cure is destruction.
The last major threat to our trees was Dutch elm disease back in the 1970s and 80s. Ironically, ash was chosen to fill the gaps left behind. So even if we do manage to find a resistant species, perhaps it's a mistake to be too prescriptive this time round.
Some say we should see all this as an opportunity to challenge our whole philosophy of British woodland.
Trevor Dines, who works for the wild plant charity Plant Life, thinks we should let nature sort it out.
We've intervened so much, and you can almost now buy off the shelf your identical woodland that you can just take and plonk in place, and there you are, you have a woodland. That's nothing like the natural situation where you have a huge diversity, and we shouldn't go back to just planting whole scale this one sort of type of ash tree across the countryside.
Another factor for those trying to devise some kind of future for the British ash, though it's really only the supremely optimistic who hold out much hope now. And this won't be the last challenge. Chestnut blight, for example, is waiting in the wings. Next time, many hope we'll be ready and our defences tougher.